Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. And I'm also a certified empowerment coach. I like to empower men. That's why I'm on this call with men today. And we're just continuing our journey with Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago. That's the guy who's looking funky in orange. And Dr. Marvin Thompson in Louisiana. He's hanging out. So, Glenn, give a little bit of background about yourself, and Dr. T, a little background on himself, and we'll get right into the convo.
Absolutely, everybody, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Glenn Barker, and I work with the Mankind Project. And we're a 30-year-old group that has grown from a single men's weekend into a international organization. What we provide is an opportunity for men to take out a couple of days of their life and truly examine their lives in a powerful way. But what I like to say is we separate the boy that makes excuses from the man who takes responsibility. And that's an ongoing process for a lot of men. And to be with good men and good processes that give space and time to do that, I think is crucial. I think it's crucial in development in our men. I believe is sorely missing. And many of the men that I know have grown great strength and encouragement from the company of good men that were there to not shoot down our dreams and not buy our stories. So this has been a wonderful experience for me. I lead the as the executive director at MKP in Chicago, and I get the opportunity to work with wonderful men along the way. And so that's Glenn Barker. And that's
all right.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to be with you.
Nice, right back at you. Dr. T, share a little about yourself before we start laying it down.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marvin Thompson. I'm an educator. I've been in education for 25 years now. And most of my work has been dealing with challenged schools. So I really am what you might call a school reformer. And my major focus has always been about reforming systems. We use the term improvement, but it's really a systems of empowerment and building capacity for the people involved in organizations to actually make decisions that improve their conditions. And I think that's what real empowerment is. I've held positions from fifth grade teacher to district superintendent, and currently am running an education foundation focusing on mentoring young men and fathers. And it's a timely topic given what Dr. Vibe and Mr. Barker do. Because as we look at where our society is today, we see a little alienation of men and literally men trying to identify where they fit in this changing landscape in our society. So I find that a lot of our young men are not only looking for mentors, but they're also looking for direction.
Excellent. That is good stuff. Well, for those who have not heard of us before, you just found out who we are, and we're not just showing up for the first time. We've been doing these conversations, I don't think for a year yet, have we?
Not quite,
but
not quite.
I have to celebrate the anniversary, but I was chatting with Glenn earlier on this week, and I said, we got to get a show topic. And I just plotted out there, men's changing role in society, and Glenn said, that's brilliant. So I said, let's make it happen. So let's have a really good interactive conversation here. Dr. T or Glenn, when you hear of the topic, men's changing role in society, what comes to your mind?
Well, for me, my first thought is the family. And we discussed this. Glenn and I both attended the Congressional Black Caucus conference this past weekend, and I was invited as a guest speaker. And one of the topics in my forum was the role of the father in today's society, particularly the black father in the African American community. But in response to that, I think, and what I shared then, I'm going to share now. When we begin to talk about one role of the family unit, this being the father and the male as a separate entity, there signifies a problem. So when we talk about fathers or men, we talk about them in their roles. Men see themselves in many roles, primarily as initially in the traditional model, the breadwinner. Secondarily, they see themselves, at least society has framed them, as the disciplinarian in the house, and in some formative role of accountability. But as we've progressed over the last 40 years, we've talked less and less about the family. And I think that has fragmented the dialogue about where the role of men is. The family unit is, in fact, the first social unit in our society. And the man and the male is a huge component of that initial formal unit. And we have digressed to a point where men are trying to identify their role in a changing landscape of families. So when you incorporate the number of single-family households, whether they're male or females, regardless, the male role has changed dramatically. And there are a lot of items in this landscape that have caused that and has caused uncertainty. And as I want to say this, I say it all the time, but we don't have to move to resolve an issue or identify a solution at the peril or the demise of another group. And I want us all always be mindful of that, because typically solution-oriented, even when we do inquiry, there seems to be a pattern of denouncing one thing as the cause of something. And sometimes I think where we are is a changing landscape that now affords men an opportunity to assess where they are, why they are, and where they want to go. I see it as more of a growth opportunity than it is something that's wrong.
Okay. Glenn, want to add on to that?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. What I see is going on with men and the changing role of men in the world, and here in the United States especially, there's two parts. One part stays the same, and one part is very much changing. The division of labor in men, I made a few notes. Division of labor, the socialization of men or not, the nuclear family. We have a number of things we can hit. Economic trends have affected the role of men. Changing caregivers, the caregiver role has changed in men. Non-residential fathers, right? And of course, divorced and separated fathers. And of course, now we have same-sex marriages, right? So we have gay fathers and stay-at-home fathers. That's just a short list of all the different roles that men find themselves in as our society is evolving. So that part has changed. And so what I'd like to get to in this conversation as well is to say, there's something that doesn't have to change, and it doesn't change for men, and that is where they find their masculinity within themselves. No matter what role a man is in, does that necessarily mean it has to be a challenge to his manhood? And in part, that's the part of the conversation as well that I'd like to pursue.
Okay. Well, you know what, Glenn? You know I don't mind when you like to drive the ship. So you've broken down a number of different topics. So let's share about these topics that you've broken down. And what's the first topic that you wanted to chat about?
Well, one of the things was just a simple division of labor, right? Now with working mothers a lot, what's demanded or asked of a lot of men is to be a contributor in the home. You'll see articles that men that do dishes are sexy, to women. Take out the garbage and we'll go out to dinner. Very nice. This is something that is maybe not what your father did. Maybe what other men might see as being maybe socially the woman's work in some traditional or sometimes not very productive sense. But right. This is changing, and to not say consider the division of labor, how you're going to raise your family, and in many areas, how you're going to earn your money, who's going to drive the kids, who's going to take care of the things that need taken care of, so that neither person is overly burdened. This alone is something that many men have to look at seriously, is what is their contribution in this division of labor area. I can pause or...
Well, and it's interesting because I was making dinner tonight, and I thought, my father, when he was younger and growing up and with a family, he didn't make dinner on a regular basis, and like definitely the rules have changed. I love cooking. Well, he likes to brag about his cooking, it's okay. It's all right. But I think if you go back generations, even contributing much to the home, because of the way society has changed, at least North American society has changed, that's been a definite shift in men's culture, period. That of course, we're graduating from it, but there's still maybe some men who say, you know what, that's the lady's job, not my job. I think it's changing, but I think it took a lot of time to get there, but it's going to take time for it to draw back. Dr. T?
Well, I had a different experience than you. My dad did all the cooking in my house.
Yeah, everyone has a different experience, obviously.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about that is my dad was a 32-year sergeant major in the Marine Corps. So when you think about manhood, I mean, this guy epitomizes every ideal in the traditional sense of a man. But one of the things that I learned about manhood, and this is where all of our concepts come from, those who are fortunate enough to have models. And when we talk about role models, this to me is the epitome of role model, the father. And my dad came home every day, and once he took off that uniform, he was just dad. He was just husband. And the role in the house were defined by the needs of the family. And this, again, I'm going to continually go back because those are the best examples I've always seen. And I always compared my experiences with those of my classmates and my peers who may not have had that particular environment, or meaning a father present, may have been in a single parent home, or had a father present and were more of a old-fashioned or older model, what we might even call traditional, that you described, Dr. Vibe. But there was a constant in either of those, and the constant was that every reaction by the father, whether they were like mine or not, focused on family needs, and the role of the man was determined by his comfort level, and one, what he was able to contribute, and two, at what freedoms he was given to contribute. And I can talk about that. You know, when men try to exert, and I've seen this, and I still see it, when fathers try to exert and share their experiences with the young men, sometimes they're met with obstacles where mothers or women who are present in that young man's life, particularly if they're caretakers, feel so much ownership and accountability that they have a difficult time relinquishing it. And I think we see more of that in those households where we have the non-residential father, where the mothers take so much ownership for that raising that child that fathers sometimes are hampered in the opportunity to really do some modeling and really do some mentoring because they're not the primary caretaker. And those are where I've seen the biggest gaps in men identifying their roles and really walking away from them when they find that struggle exists.
For both of you, and Dr. Thompson made a very interesting point, many interesting points, both of you, but walking away from that responsibility, walking away from that role as a caregiver, there are a number of people will say that more men are walking away from that role. True, false, your thoughts?
More than what? We do know that there is a number of, and Dr. Thompson will speak to this, I think he's probably the most learned in this area, the systems that we have. Yes, there is more than ever, there's more divorced, separated families. More than ever, there's more children born out of wedlock to young people. More and more, there's no denying the data states that there is a absence of remoteness of the father in young people's lives. No question. I was going to argue that point. What seems to be exacerbating that also is the systems that we're in. And perhaps I'd like to hand this to Dr. Thompson to talk about those societal issues that are actually reinforcing the breakdown of the family. So I'd like to pass this baton to him.
Well, that's a lofty one, and it really takes some time to think about it. Well, let me start out by your original question, Dr. Vi, which I think is always the elephant in the room, depending on the audience you're talking with. If you're talking with women and you ask that question, and I know many colleagues and friends who are in that boat, single mothers who would clarify or quantify their former spouses or partners as non-accessible and non-engaged, they would, belabor the point that they don't try. At the same time, you would have a counter conversation with that significant other who might suggest that they're not allowed that opportunity. And this is where the danger in narratives become the norm. When we begin to say things such as a lot of men don't do, that becomes the informal narrative in which people believe and operate out of, which is an underlying part of the systemic things that Glenn alluded to. One of the systems that everyone's familiar with is our juvenile justice system, particularly those when it comes to custody issues and divorce settlements. When you look at the focus of the system, and the court system is a system, anything that is structured, that serves people is in fact a system, particularly when you're taking local dollars for it. But when you look at the focus of that system, it inherently does not have the same goal that the initial family structure had. That family was formed on the belief and the ideologies of growing a family, love, nurture, caretaking, upbringing, and all of the components of child rearing towards one effective goal, one common goal. Whenever that breakdown occurred and when the system gets involved, it does not have that same goal. The system has a different goal than the initial one. And although by the time parents reach the court system, their goal is to dissolve it, the courts automatically move their focus to the dissolution of that family within the very structure that only serves the limits of what the court can do. And here's where you see court cases primarily focus on monetary objectives, child support payments, how visitation rights, the two biggest issues in property division. The child is only considered in terms of where they lay their head, how much time they spend. But we don't get into the qualitative components of what we all as a society expect from our families. And I would argue that if a system began to move in the direction of reinforcing, even in the dissolution of a family, begin to reinforce some of those basic values and tenets that brought the family together as a criteria for disillusioning the family and reframing it, we keep parents focused on what their number one objective was, which was child rearing, and that focus was on the child. So that's just one example of how systems thinking and how that system operates and with its limitations it has on the family. And that dynamic creates a new paradigm shift, and it changes relationships, dialogue, interaction, and we already know the impact that it has on young people. And that's regardless of age, that it can have on young people. So I think it's important when we talk about systems and we hear narratives that we question whether or not that narrative is a point for discussion or is it a narrative supported by facts. Discussion narratives are one thing, it is an engagement tool, but I think when we try to lay them out as this is the way it is, I think we have to be cautious and be very clear that this is a perception. And some narratives, most of them today, are more perception driven than based in fact.
And you know, Glenn, you were right. Handing it over to Dr. Thompson on that one. That's good stuff. Well, thanks very much.
I want to put something in on that.
Absolutely. Just before you do, I just want to shout out Tony T-Lee58 for joining and watching, and also the Per is joined us, and also I know that Stuart at Unforgivers trying to get his camera issues resolved. So I just wanted to shout them out. Continue, Glenn.
Very good. So what has entered our lexicon during our time, I'll say the last 40 years or so, is this whole arena of systems, and I'll also add into that gender politics.
What do you mean by gender politics?
It's a politicized version of what goes on in the world of gender differences. And so this victim, who's a victim, who's the perpetrator, who needs rescuing. Again, these triangles have now, these gender discussions have gone into now political discussions. And this has raised a level, I believe, of some great important dialogues. But yet now, as a politicized discussion, it now becomes about power and status and who's the victim and who's the, many times, and who's the perpetrator. And that is I think a great, for all the good it does to raise issues, there's also the pendulum that goes the other way that says that there's usually a fallout as well. So with every good, there's a shadow. With every light, there's a shadow. And now we've been at this gender politics for a number of years, and we see there's a shadow side. And that's typically that those oppressed now are the oppressors. And this is what we see. And this, I just say, is entering into our society. I believe it's in the psyche of both men and women. And I think it has another effect on our, that would lead into socialization if we want to go to that topic. I just think it's another factor that wasn't there so prevalent in our past.
I'm going to take a little turn off the highway for a second. Both you are based in America. I'm based in Canada. And it's interesting. I was going to ask this of myself, but I'll ask you this of you gentlemen first. How much, if any, has gender politics come up with the election that is going to be in your nation next year?
Glenn, you can take this.
Well, turn on your television set and watch the way folks talk. Hillary Clinton is saying that there's a war on women, and there are probably millions of women that are going to agree with her, and that there's a patriarchy in men, and that essentially men ruling the world has been part of the troubles of the world, and in ways they're right. To what degree? And where's the balance? And so what there isn't is a good counter argument to that. And so what happens is a pendulum, right? And so this is where gender becomes political. And to that end, they could be exploitive in its worst case, right? And so whenever I think you're absolutely for men and women are not included in the men's dialogue, there's a propensity there to become patriotically shadowy. Now, there's great patriarchies that have done wonderful generative things. Patriarchy itself is not bad. It's when boys are running the patriarchy and it's run with shadow, then you get your Hitlers and then you get your Stalins. So that explains a little more about the political arena, and we do see that. When Donald Trump says something about someone's looks, a woman's looks, being politically correct is important. It shows his sensitivity and possibly what he's like as a man, which is important. And then, of course, but that opens the door for a number of attacks. So I'm not defending or condemning each side. I'm just saying, if you look at the positions, how extreme they are, how polarizing gender can be, this is an idea how gender becomes political and becomes about power. Not about solutions, about power.
It's a very good point. It's more about power than solutions. Unfortunately, that's the way a lot of times politics runs. Dr. Chu, do you want to add anything on to Glenn's commentary?
No, I think Glenn summed it up. When we look at the women's movement, for example, I think this is one of the things that's always understated or undervalued. Any entity, whether it's African Americans, whether it's women, whether it's Latinos, whether it's any group, transgender groups, whatever the case may be, whenever a group gains access, it's a threat perceived by power, right? And always by the power structure, any gains are considered acceptable, meaning, hey, you got that, that's it. I don't know anyone who's ever made progress that's satisfied with where they are. And I would be hard pressed to say that that's how societies actually improve. When you bring along those who've been isolated, those who've been marginalized, and you bring them into the fold, that actually benefits everyone. So some of the things that Glenn talked about, the politicizing of gender, the politicizing of race, the politicizing of the things that are done, are literally wedges towards progress. And as I said earlier, when you begin to tear down your opposition in order to get your position, you're actually tearing down the structure. You're moving it backwards, or you're holding it still. So I think when we talk about the role of men and the impact that politics plays on it, maybe some of what we're talking about is a backlash to the progress that have been made by other groups and a perceived threat to progress and their role in progress. So as we continue the conversation, I think we may even find ourselves clarifying and getting into specifics. The man's role in what? In the family, in politics, in society in general, in the workplace, and as former heads of state, where we're starting to see more women rise in prominence, not so much yet in this country, but definitely in others. I think there are 7 or 8 heads of state, female heads of state in Africa, and that's not a new experience there. We've seen this in the Middle East. We've seen this in Africa. We've seen this in Europe, but we haven't seen it here yet. So those countries are still progressing. They're still thriving. I don't know the particulars, but I think this is an opportunity to really start defining what is the role of men in a progressive world, right, in all of those areas.
Good point. Good point. Glenn, it sounded like you're either agreeing or wanted to add on to something to that.
I think Dr. Vibe, that Dr. Thompson has moved this right into the next arena, which I would say is the socialization. And I don't want to leave. I need to put into the conversation. I believe it is about the adaptability of the man. I really do. Our roles have changed. They're going to change. My children's role will change from mine. It's really, for me, it's the man that can see that socialization. That's the progressive learning of one's culture and how to live in it. The progressive learning of one's culture and how to live in it. Cultures are a false construct. It's really not real. It's there to bring order. It's there to provide services. So in some ways, like Dr. Thompson says, there's systems. How do you be in a system and not be taken over by a system? This, I think, is the quest of a man to still be principled in his ways, to still know who he is, to be able to define what's right and wrong, to have the borders, and to be the kind of man that can not let that be his defining himself by it, but yet seeing it as a way to acclimate or resist, but take an active role rather than a passive role in the progress of that. If men don't, then you see them fall categorically into places where they're dysfunctional, and they are dysfunctional within it. And men not finding their place, I think, is more of a personal crisis of the man being able to adapt or not to the situation and still find himself as a powerful presence and contributor to the household, to the workforce, to taking the kids to the soccer game. That this is important, and that his presence in that and the things that he can give and get from that are needed and wanted. And men have to find that for themselves. That's in part what I do in doing the men's work that I do. So socialization, adapting to the socialization.
You had it. Yeah, socialization. Yeah, I think that's actually a real issue, because the socialization of men in today, just their roles are changing so much. I think they're more. Am I right in making this statement that more men are feeling out of sorts when it comes to socialization today than maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Wow.
Either one of you.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll do it shortly. I'll say, look at the 50s. The 50s male was probably the heyday of very clear gender roles, and a lot of folks say that they were very happy during those times. That was the man was the man of the house, and the lady stayed home and they raised the kids. And as much fun as that's made of, the roles were so clear that in many ways, especially the men, felt at least they knew what their role was, and they could operate within the confines of that, and they knew how to gauge themselves and with other men. So there was a lot of mirrors around. A lot of fathers were at home. There were a lot of ways for them to check to see how this worked for them. And so the 50s male time was a time of very clear roles, and the 60s changed those roles dramatically. And ever since then, we've been under constant flux. And I find men haven't been able to separate the role from who they are as a man. They see these very enmeshed, and I think some of it's natural. The work I do is part of who I am. But that has to be there has to be sovereignty in the man, so that the role can circle around the sovereignty. All right, I'll put it in that light, Dr. Thompson.
I like that concept, Glenn, of sovereignty. Yeah. I think that's important.
Who are you?
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, who are you?
Yeah.
I'm changing diapers.
Well,
I'm changing diapers.
How many?
Wireless of a man? No.
How many? Yeah. How many men are asked that question, and then the next part is how many men can answer that question.
For them. And then,
I like to go further. Sometimes I will ask a man, "Why do you have the name you do?"
Yeah,
I do circles with it.
I do circles
with it. One of the first questions is, "Who are you?" If I was to take off the mask, the part that lets you see what I want you to see, who am I? Second question I ask men in circles and is, "Why are you here? This point in time, why is this important to you? What are you doing?" And then what do you need? What do you need as a man? Sure. And then what are your gifts as a man? These things start to bring clarity. That, like I say, the other things can let it float around you. But I believe you need other men in your lives that can help ground the man in his own masculinity, so that things he does is not his only defining part of himself.
I'll let Dr. T come in, but then I'll have, from what you just shared with us, Glenn, I have a deeper conversation piece. But go ahead, Dr. T.
Well, I want to just comment about Glenn's in terms of the progression of men. Glenn referenced the 1950s, and I think for most people in a certain generation, they're going to identify that as, hey, one of the best times of our country's existence in terms of where we had reached what we sought. So we had the nuclear family was intact. We had economic growth amongst all groups of people. In the African-American community, the late 40s and 50s was our heyday. I mean, we were literally beginning to move and develop a strong middle class. So when I look at the role of men, and I think this is what I'm about to share, is a bigger picture of where men need to be emotionally and psychologically. As leaders, any leader knows that at some point you move away from leading, and the course that you set, you actually just sit back and reinforce those who are following to achieve their objectives. And that's a confident leader. That's someone who says, I know where we're going, I'm secure in the direction, and I am pleased that people are growing because we can now move further ahead. So if we take a look at the changes and things that men feel they've given up, one of the things that I always look at is the time span of when they've happened. So these things are cyclical. So when you look at the last 20 or 30 years, when we've seen an increase in women achieving in the workplace and moving into monumental positions that have typically, they're able to compete intellectually, economically, on many levels with men, that doesn't signal the end. To me, it suggests either a continuing nurturing, depending on where we were headed, or setting a new course where you're beginning to lead. So I think men, in the bigger scope of things, as a society, have latched on to, again, we're coming back to the narrative, without literally sitting back and thinking, you know what, maybe in my role, I'm supposed to be nurturing this change so that when I identify where we want to go, I can set that course and continue to take us further. I think that's one of the dynamics on the macro scale that we tend to forget because we get so caught up in the weeds of the individual narratives, the politicizing of change. And change is inevitable, but I think as men, some of us like to just hold on to our power positions and really fight change in general. And I think Glenn used the word adaptability. I think that's a critical component.
When you gentlemen get in conversations with men, do you get the opportunity to ask them what their role is? And if you do get a chance to ask them that, what are they telling you?
I get stories. They'll tell me what happened.
Okay.
Right. So I think the concept of role is pretty generic to them, but they will eventually begin to tell me a story. And that story usually includes someone impeding their ability to achieve a particular goal. So they don't start with, I set my role as, I perceive my role as. They will typically start with, this happened to me, she did this or they did that, so I wasn't able to, which tells me in their mindset, their solution is fixing the other person rather than establishing their own position. And Glenn can speak to that. That's what's Glenn called the victim approach. Mm-hmm.
Now, Doc, just before we go further, Dr. T, I don't know, but there seems to be a scratching sound coming from your microphone. You're not scratching against the microphone. I'm just hearing some background noise every once in a bit, but
okay. Is that better?
All right, no problem. Yeah. Are you using your desk microphone or using the microphone?
The desk microphone. Yep.
Okay, cool. Glenn,
so what do I hear from men when we talk about their roles? What I hear from men is uncertainty. That's what I hear. It's a true dilemma where I'm in trouble if I do, I'm in trouble if I don't, and so I'm stuck. And typically what comes up in dilemmas for most of us is a very dysfunctional rise of a terrible coping mechanism that says I'm either going to act in a way that is acting out or become passive in a way that doesn't work for me. So these are dilemmas for men. how do I fit in? How do I not? How do I navigate these things? And for me, that always reflects more to not your circumstance, but your ability to cope with it and deal with the impacting and the consequences of you having, as a man, having a position on that and holding your ground. Not in a way that makes you stoic necessarily or stubborn, but have a true sense of value in who you are. Again, I'm going to go back to that sovereignty piece. And that's the piece that says, I know what's important to me. I'm going to take this step. I know what's at risk. I may make somebody unhappy. I am willing to or not. Dr. Thompson talks to a good point about not taking a step because you've been asked to. But there's an impact and there's a consequence to that. The little boy in us wants to run and not deal with it, or have someone rescue us, or it to just go away. The truth of it is, men, we do have to deal with it. And the better we can do that responsibly and take on that responsibility of that impact, that consequence, and do the next right thing to do. Until men have that piece, I think they fall into uncertainty and they fall into dilemmas, and it becomes actually more and more dysfunctional for them, and they find less and less of a place because they're trying to find ground, and they don't have it within them, and so they look for it. They get pushed around. It's like they don't have a rudder on their ship. So I see uncertainty.
That's good stuff. Actually, we have a question from Upgrade to Me saying, per the title role, what gives society the right to dictate or define the position in which men or women operate in? I'm not sure why can't we just be as we were naturally created to be?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to, I think we said something about that a little while ago about the role of what and in what capacity.
Just before you go any further, Dr. Thompson, try to stay still because you're rubbing against something. When you're moving around, you're rubbing against something. So if you can stay still, that'd be great.
Well,
go ahead.
What I was saying is, when we talk about roles, we have to define a role in what. And those roles should not be defined by society. I think that's the significance of the question.
Yeah.
But your response, we have an evolving society, and I'm going to stick to the family. No two family units having the same parts operate the same way. I know fathers who cook. Dr. Bob, you and I had that example in the traditional model. My dad cooked, your dad didn't, right? My mom didn't pick up a finger in the house. She had 4 boys in the house, and my mom didn't do anything. So if anybody walked into my house was not the traditional one. And I learned very early on that it wasn't about your roles. It was about what was needed to do, and the roles were defined by goals instead of by gender, right? So roles have to be tied to an objective. I think we move beyond the role of an individual by their sexual identity or their gender identity, but more importantly, by objective. We're now in an action society. We're progressing beyond all of those traditional norms, and I think we're just a society that's in transition. But if we begin to define roles by objectives, I think we begin to start valuing people more, and the maleness or whatever gender there is becomes a nomenclature that really doesn't apply.
Excellent. Would you like to add to that, Glenn?
What gives the society the right to put these roles on us? My first quick answer would be you have the choice as a man, as an individual, to reject any roles from any society. These are pressures. Societies are systems. Dr. Thompson has really opened my mind to this piece of society. It's a false construct, just like your job. If you don't want to flip burgers, don't take a job that requires you to flip burgers. The ability for us to reject the roles is our choice. Now, if we reject all the roles of a society, which are kind of a universal agreement about how we're going to act together, we reject all of them, chances are we will be rejected by the society. So realize there's an impact and consequence to that. To be submissive to all the demands of a society is also dangerous because, again, where are you if you are constantly a chameleon trying to fit in and you're going to lose yourself? So this is a choice, and it's a wonderful dilemma, again, that men face. And I don't think that's really changed over time. I think the circumstances, the story has changed. You can go back to Roman times. You could either be a Roman soldier or you could do the laundry, or you could be you can serve slop to the pigs. How are you going to work in a society? The choices are not. How do you be in a system without becoming the system? Is truly the quest of the man. And if the system is something that you care enough about for the next generation, you look to influence that in a way, to call on those that have the change agents that you want, and support that. Or you can choose not to. I walk away from the system, and we see that as well. People going off grid, doing organic farming, pulling the plug, no internet, no everything else. Wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful life. But this is the choice that we need to make, and I like that part of the empowerment piece that says those dictates and those demands do not mean you have to accept them.
Right.
Great stuff. Excellent. Another question. No, go ahead, Dr. T. You want to add anything?
Blaine covered it. Well done.
Okay. Absolutely. Got a question here from Streaming Voice. Have you talked about how men in prison affect the role of men in society?
Oh,
this is a good question. No. Oh, Glenn's looking to the side on that one. Who wants to hit that one first?
The school to prison pipeline. Take it.
Well, I can tell you. Well, first of all, when we look at the issue, the prison in society and how it affects it, let's look at who's in prison. Let's look at the largest population of people who are going to prison, and it's the African American male. And America makes up 5% of the world's population, but we imprison over 25% of the world's population. That's huge. And we already know about, and this isn't a narrative, this is fact-based narrative, about the disparity in the arrest rate in the sentencing guidelines from one community to the other. When we start looking at the absence of men, a large number of men, beginning at the age of 15 and on, we began to look at the availability of the development of a culture in certain communities that actually creates a culture because of the absence of men. And we see younger men who do not have fathers, who do not have positive male role models to evaluate and judge themselves by, indoctrinating themselves. And Glenn uses this one metaphor that I love. Young men who do not have fathers will burn down the village just to feel the heat. The attention that they need and that they're seeking, they don't have and don't see a resource or a guide to them. A lot of the ills that we see in our society, if you look at when this prison industrial complex began to grow, you will see it grow back in the 70s. You will also see a significant increase in failing schools, the number of dropouts, teen delinquency, and we saw in the late 70s, early 80s, the beginning of the school to prison pipeline. Subsequently, all of the policies that have been affected and have been put in place are outgrowths of that one simple dynamic. So when we talk about the impact of fathers in prison, let's look at the population, and we can extrapolate this to every population. You'll see it in the Latino community, you'll see it in the white community, you'll see it in the African American community. And typically all three of these communities have one constant thing in common, and that is low income. Those who are affected most by this loss of father or male presence in communities are typically men, regardless of race, who are in low income. But when you dig even deeper, those of color are trapped into this system at even larger rates. And when you look at the impact on their young men and their girls, because I think there's an understatement of the value of a man and a male's presence to girls, there's a security factor. Girls, and I have a daughter, begin to gauge their self-worth on how their father treats them. In the absence of the father, who are the males in a society that they are gauging their self-worth from? Young men who don't have it.
Okay, just some updates because we got a lot of messages all of a sudden going on here. Upgrade to me has said, I don't know exactly what she disagrees with what you just shared, Dr. T, but I'm wanting her to elaborate more on what she disagrees with. And then at @ourwill_1, just a shout out to him. He was I was very blessed to get into a conversation he had about manhood last week. He says it is not shocking because America has always been a slave nation. Also, got another question here. I know. At Gotta Get Out of, and he was trying to log on for our conversation. He's had some camera troubles, but he'll be on the next time. They have a question. Is a man's role going to continue to diminish as women's role changes, or will it adapt to the times?
I'd like to get to that, but I would also, if you don't mind, I'd like to also add another ripple effect to everything Dr. Thompson said to answer that man about the effect of, say, jail life on other men in our society. So if I can go back into that. This exacerbates it's almost like a self-fulfilling snowball effect of what's going on. Just consider a couple of things I'll just rattle off. How that goes into racial profiling. All this that goes on seems it grows the idea that men of color are it's inevitability, and that this racial profiling starts to profile by proof strategies that appear to be there because of the numbers. So it exacerbates it. Now it's growing into itself. Then there's a growing expectation of that this is going to be a quarter of us anyway, and this is like an inevitable. These psychic pieces that are starting to become almost a given in our society are very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. I also think the gangster life that's being celebrated is another very dangerous aspect that our youth. We emulate what we celebrate, folks. And I would say, be careful what you celebrate. If we're celebrating gangsters, if we're celebrating criminals, if we're celebrating divergence, this is very unhealthy because it'll be a chain that's very hard to break. And so that also plays now to gender politics and race baiting and a prison complex. And then how women look at men, how men look at themselves. So these are all the social impacts that all of these have a ripple effect, and many of those are going unchallenged. And so this is what works in the background of the thinking, of the reporting, of the police, of the training, that leads to things like Ferguson and such. There's, I'll just leave it at that. Those factors are all in there.
Okay, I just want to update and at Upgrade to Me has had a deeper response here. The problem is that we aren't taught about ourselves. I had no father and neither did my brother, but we discovered how to think and use our minds. Spirituality, if you will. So Dr. T, be careful when you're moving. So if we are taught to know who we are and use our minds positively instead of being programmed, then role models don't really matter, right?
No, I disagree.
So
I think it's all programming.
Okay.
It depends on what programming you have. We have hard wiring. I think men have 4 pieces of hardwire in them, and it depends what the software that runs them. It really is. So it's all programming. If you get, go ahead, Dr. Thompson. That's all.
No, I kind of agree a little bit with what Upgrade to Me says, and I think I understand the context of what they were saying. I think it's important, and this is to Upgrade to Me, to never look at your own experiences and extrapolate them to everyone. I'm impressed with what you said because you literally spoke to what Glenn and I have been referring to all night about the systems thinking. So in the way that you approached it, you obviously began to separate and begin to own your own direction. And I bless you for that because I don't think many people do. However, there is a segment of our society who doesn't have what you internally had. Whatever supports you had, they don't. And I think that's where we want to be cautious about extrapolating our own experiences to others, but to take what you have, which I think is something special, and it's rare. And when I'm in the inner cities where I work with young people, where you can find those young people who have that kind of strength, who've been given that kind of support, and now understand it's not that I expect everyone should be doing what I have because I'm demonstrating it, but to share with them some of the things that help you not to be programmed, so that you are able to think for yourself, so that you are able to set your own direction. So I agree with you in the concept that role models eventually for some kids are not necessary. But on the whole, when we take a look at the things that Glenn was talking about, that influence our society, there has to be an opposite. It's an opposing view or an opposing figure that gives that child something that says, I see what you mean. And if you don't have that I see what you mean to look at, to talk to inquire of, to question, you really are limited to accepting and fighting through some of the things that are presented to you. And society can have a huge impact on young people who don't have the skills or the voice that you've developed. So I think role models are relevant. And in our meeting this weekend that Glenn and I attended at the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman James Clyburn spoke specifically to the need for more role models. And I think we are in the stage of beginning to find, with all of the mentoring that we see going around the country, we're at a stage of, and having to do it for so long, we're reaching a point where we're able to define what that mentoring is with more certainty, because young people are telling us exactly what it is that they like to do and become.
You know what? And it's Upgrade to me is on fire tonight because she just said, she goes, oh, dang. Okay. I didn't think about that. So I think that you two are getting to the same river.
Well,
eventually.
I love what you said, because I literally got excited because I went, wow, that's a person who, given some of the disadvantages they had, every kid needs to learn what they learned. You know, this is the stuff that our other young people learn from young people. You know, they really do. They can become more empowered when they see their peers move forward. So I was excited to see someone who was even questioning why we need it. That tells me a lot about that person's strength.
Absolutely. Glenn, want to add anything to that?
Dr. Thompson did a great job. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, good stuff. What's next on your list? I don't know how long I'm going to go for, but the way the interaction's going, hey, we may be on for a while, which is not a bad thing. I got some time. If you guys got some time. Well,
we can go into the economic change in the nuclear family, but also let's. What was the question that one of our participants had?
He was about the changing. Yes, let's go back to is a man's role going to continue to diminish as a woman's role changes, or will it adopt to the times? I think that's as great a
question as any, Dr. Thompson.
I apologize. Will men adapt to the times? I think this goes back to something I stated earlier. If we begin to look at our future, and I always ask this question when I'm in forums, particularly when we're talking about politics and the future of our country, our educational system, where are we going? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? Good leaders always let those who follow, let them know what the game plan is. My question is, do we know where we're going? Because I think right now men are in reactive mode. This is why the dialogue continues. We are literally in reactive mode. And the work that Glenn Barker does with the Mankind Project, I've seen firsthand, I've heard firsthand, I've experienced firsthand the reflective pieces of that really get men to acknowledge the fact that, oh my God, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm feeling all this way, but I haven't set a course. I know what I'd like to have, but collectively, we're talking about where our society goes. And I interpreted the question this way: where is our country headed? Because in order to determine whether our roles change, men have to adapt and understand one specific concept, and that is, if we are changing roles as men, where are we headed when we finish, right? And then set a direction. I think if we define what that role is, we're actually fitting ourselves into the current construct. And that literally holds us in a holding pattern. And you're going to end up fighting for space. I think this is about progression. Those who are moving us forward, women are progressing, minorities are progressing. We have different groups who are progressing and finding their space. If men hold and stop right now and say, what am I supposed to do? We as a society fall. If women did it, we would fall. So we can't afford that luxury. It's not even a luxury. We can't afford that. I think this is an opportunity for men to sit back and not evaluate themselves on the current trends at the demise of something else. I think this is an opportunity for us to say, this is good, this isn't great, or if it can be better, where do we want to go? And then collectively engage in the society to move that way. I just think that's where we are. We're not on the outs. And if we are, it's because we haven't learned how to talk about it and how to act on what we've seen.
Well, and the conversations keep on flowing on the sidebar here. At @RWill_1 says this country doesn't have clear direction. At Upgrade to me, she's our executive producer tonight. She's just filling the questions. She goes, organically, animals follow their creator or mother their babies. Where in the world did men lead? I can't get this question. Where in the world did men are the leaders come from? I don't understand that question. So if she can clarify that, that'd be great. What else? Oh, we have a streaming voice says, what is in place to change men's role? I don't see it.
Glenn, that's your area.
So what is in place to change the men's role? I'll put it this way. If a man knows who he is and what he wants, he will make his role. And what he can't make for himself, he'll either adapt to it or reject it. And it is that kind of clarity that I think gives the man a certainty in very uncertain times. Let me put this out there. I think the society we're living in today is actually much better suited for women. It's a communication age. It's a collaborative age, and in many ways, those kind of environments. I'll put it in this arena. Women, very often, will take the risk of being emotionally hurt by exposing themselves to the risk-making part of asking for what they need. I need help. I want to talk to somebody about this problem. I'm troubled with this now. This seems to be inherent in a lot of women, and in the society we're in, where it is shifting, it's changing. This kind of emotional openness to ask for help and ask for what you need and adapt is, again, what I see intrinsically much more inherent in women, and I believe that our society requires that now. Now, here are men who maybe had, 6 jobs to do, 200 years ago, have now, 60 ways to look, and now there's a fragmented roles for men. So where do men go to look to see their sovereignty and their strength and their collaborativeness in their roles when there's such a fragmented part of a lot of male thinking? And I make up that inherently men don't go to that place of vulnerability or openness because they risk being hurt by it. And so there is, I think, a natural propensity to men to not be that kind of collaborative person. And then they're in a construct here where that is much more conducive to that type of personality. So this is another kind of soft, kind of part hardwiring, part software dilemma that men face. And this is part of the things that I try to do with the men, to make safe spaces, at least. So at least with other men, for a certain time, we could open that up, go to the deep place, pull it back out and say, okay, I know how to deal with this now. And then you can go out into the world and not experiment, right, with it. You experiment with it in a safe container and then go out in the world and give it your best. So this men's community, that isn't there to create soft males, is to create strong males, to let them work out these things so they can in some ways, play catch up in the world of using socialization in a healthy environment that makes them stronger in this kind of society.
Wow, Glenn, you're bringing it, man. You are bringing it. You know what I'm loving about Blab? The interaction with all the props that both of you are getting is great. And I see the triangle discussion that @RWill is having with @Dr. T and Upgrade to me. They're having their little sidebar conversation outside. That's great. I'd like to give a great next question. Oh, wow. The questions are flying tonight. Actually, I just wanted to give a shout out to @John A. Birch. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching while you're watching this with Common Core Math with his daughters. So that is good stuff. Thanks so much. Another question we have here for both of you. @Streamy Voice has, do most men know a change is needed? But I guess what we want to know is, what type of change are you talking about?
Dr. Thompson, you want to take that?
But
do most men know that a change is needed? I think a streaming voice, my response would be, I think most men know something's not right. At least they feel something's not right. And I say most men, I think there's no direction given to them, and you take a look at the changes that have taken place in our society in the last 30 years. Now, I'm not talking about men, I'm talking about other groups. Those social changes men have actually helped it and nurtured that along a little bit with some angst and a little bit of opposition, but not enough to stop it. And along the way, even if there was any fear, if there was any anxiety, men did really nothing but embrace it and support it to the point that they're now going, what now? I think a lot of men, and the runs the gamut. I think men who are older, 40s and above, might see it a little differently. They may feel a little put out or shut out. Then I see younger men who are sometimes just totally lost in what to do because the social changes that their parents began to raise them in have been drastic. So I think most men, when they say change is needed, I think they're wondering, where are we going so that they could set a course for themselves? I think there's a lack of direction with so many changes that are taking place in our society that it's not just men. I think it's groups of people who in general are questioning what's next and how committed can I be to this particular direction that I initially thought I was going to go on because I can't be secure. I think that's the bigger picture. Because when we say men, as a group, we fit into the larger society, which means we're acting collectively, that we can begin to evaluate and judge and redirect, and all of our relationships are built on a common theme or a set of common themes and values. I think those things are changing, and that in itself is causing everyone to question it. But because men haven't had a singular focus about them, it questions where they fit. There hasn't been a discussion about men in this country for quite some time. So I think that's part of the issue of why men are going, what's up?
All right. Good stuff. Well, I just got a friend, I guess I'm becoming a good friend of mine online on the show. He's chimed in, Ryan Williams at rwill_1. Thank you so much. I was wondering how long it was going to take you to get involved here with all, you're typing away on the side, but welcome. First of all, thanks very much for joining in, and I hope you're enjoying the conversation.
This is a great conversation. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Welcome, Mr. Williams.
Absolutely. We're loud and clear, man.
Yeah, this is a great conversation and upgrade to me. She always sits in the chat room, never jumps in, but hopefully one day she can jump into the seat.
Good.
We'll get her in. We'll get her in.
One thing I wanted to talk about, as far as one thing I heard, I don't know if you guys heard of Dr. Umar Johnson.
I have. I've seen him live.
Is phenomenal. Yeah, some things he says is crazy, but most of the things he talks about are phenomenal. And I just heard a clip on that he talked about education. He talked about education. He talks about children and the black male. And one of the things he brought up is that in the 90s, one of the things that hindered the black family was the imprisonment of black males, and that was because of what was instituted by Bill Clinton. For the first time, we saw droves of people being sent to prison for life sentences for something they commit. So you had if you had 2 or 3 strikes in the 90s, if you did not commit, you can go to jail for life for not committing a felony, based off that 3-strike policy. And that is something that caused our men to be sent to jail be staying in jail for life for a number of years for no particular reason at all. And our society is the probably the only society that that is so inhumane as far as when it comes to our prison. How I brought that up to say is that it is causing our males to not be at home. We don't have anyone protecting our boys and our girls and our women. We don't have people in our communities leading us. And another thing we talked about with this society is that we have so many things that we can listen to or are getting fed from that we don't have one clear goal as a nation. This nation doesn't have one set goal in mind. What is our goal as a nation? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to innovate? It's so competitive. what is our goal as a nation and as a people? But only thing we can agree on sometime is sports, and when we in the Olympics. That's it.
I don't think most men agree on that.
No, we won't.
Go ahead, Dr. T.
You brought up some interesting points, Ryan, and I'm going to start with education as a whole, and that's where I live. Most people believe that education is designed. We're led to believe that education is designed to educate us to help us achieve our goals. That's a fundamental thing that I think every one of us, every parent sends their kid off to school with. What I've learned in 25 years is this. We've been in reform in education for over 50 years. And in those 50 years, the only thing we've seen happen is a greater division of achievement amongst the groups that we said we were reformed to fix, that we were setting out to fix. So either the people who are designing are idiots, or they're achieving the goal that they actually have. When we implemented No Child Left Behind, the goal was that 100% of the entire school population, you're already nodding your head, Ryan, right? 100% of all kids would achieve at the level established by the federal government. I had to ask myself a question as a principal of a school at the time this was written. And I actually met with the author of this law on the day that it was passed, and we argued over it for 2.5 hours. If that actually happened, do you have the jobs for these people to go to? So at the same time, the federal government was talking about getting 100% of kids educated at a certain level, there should have been a dialogue about the increase in growth in industries in the country for them to go to work. The absence of that conversation, and at the same time, the growth of our countries, our companies moving overseas, did not jive together. So if in fact No Child Left Behind had been achieved, can you imagine what our unemployment rate would have been? You brought up the issue of the prison pipeline. Not only, and I want you to think about this, Ryan, because you seem to have a good understanding of some of the facts, but here's something I want you to also think about. If in fact the 3 strikes rules, and I remember when it was passed in the 90s, you had people who were serving life for basically jaywalking, right? A guy who gets caught with a joint goes to prison for life. So what does that do? The premise sold to the public was let's get the violent criminals off the street. At the same time that this happened, we saw private corporations forming prisons. So we began the 3 strikes rule, and the growth of the prison industrial complex grew at the same time. From the 90s to today, we began to see the growth of companies such as Starbucks and the like, and all of these companies getting greater profits. Why? Because they begin to use prisoners as slave labor. So there are over 170 companies in the United States of America today, some including McDonald's, that we shop at every day, who use this prison industrial complex as a resource for profit. So when you look at the reason that the communities that are impacted by men going to prison are there, it's not necessarily crime. When we look at the outcome, this is about profit and it's about industry. And that's in the school to prison pipeline, and what we see happen in schools is greatly connected. You've talked about some very key elements, and particularly relative to the African American community. That understanding, that awareness creates resentment. It's a demotivator, and it's an anxiety builder, and a lot of other negative components that go with it. So I don't dismiss what you shared, because they are inherently key components to what happens in our society today.
I just want to get in here, and I want to get Glenn back in the conversation. So I just see the comment that at Upgrade to Me has just put here. She goes, our men are way too stressed, and their emotional needs are being ignored. They cry is silence because they are restricted from displaying their feelings outward. IMO. I think men more than ever before require the nurturing and support of women. I see too often that people who focus on women, which is distracting us from the fact that our men are malnourished. So Glenn, I'll have you address that first, because I know that's core in what you do with the Mankind Project, and then I'll have the other gentleman chime in. But Glenn, please respond to that.
Thank you for that kind of comment. And women do make wonderful nurturers, and I think there's a gift in that, and I think there's also there could be a crippling effect. And this is where I call to men. I'm going to back up through a lot of this and say the growing of a good man, a powerful man, a leader, regenerative and strong. This is not instinct. This is a tutelage. And in the absence of the teachers and the mentors, this is what we get. A great king and a great powerful warrior wouldn't allow this school to prison pipeline to have taken hold. This is a shadow version of an unintended, maybe a good idea, but an unintended consequence. To permit it to continue is the real atrocity, not the fact that it was implemented, that it continues to perpetrate on our people. Where are the men? How do we teach men the kind of strength to go against the systems, to go into the systems and the fight for justice in these systems? So I wanted to put that piece in there. To address the woman, I believe men will get relief from their pain from women. What's wonderful for me about women is that they will take on your pain and in many ways help you deal with your pain. And there's a need for that. That's a relief. What I see, I don't know, I think that gives men relief, but I'm not sure that makes them stronger. I think it gives them comfort, but I don't think that comfort necessarily makes them stronger because it gives them relief. What I've seen in the compassionate, powerful nurturing of men is that I won't rescue you from your fire, but I will stand with you in the fire.
Wow.
We will lock arms and we will take the next step. And if you're ready, and if you need to be carried, I will carry you. But only as long as you can get your feet back under you. And then I'm going to ask you to carry the next man. There is a difference in that. And it's not careless. It is a strength building part of the man. And I think this is the wonder. And that alone makes it is not all of it. This is the roles that I think are wonderfully gifted and done in a good way, gives the man that wonderful breadth edge, shifting to be a caring nurturer and to be loving and compassionate. And when he needs to be, he can go into the fire and stand there and hold that ground. This is what other men can do.
Wow.
I'll give that to this woman.
That was powerful stuff. Really good stuff. Dr. T, Ryan, do you want to respond to the statement about, men are malnourished?
Dr. T, you can go first.
I think Glenn pointed out something and Glenn, I love you to follow up. He does this speech about the victim triangle and the triangle, that the dynamic of how men respond to things. I think there's a real component to being malnourished in men. I think that in the dynamic in certain communities where men are absent, I think they're malnourished and don't know it, but they know something's wrong. Yeah, they're malnourished of men. So they know something's wrong, but they don't know how to define it other than there's no man here. They can tell you what they'd like to see. They could tell you what they'd like to have. They probably couldn't even identify what it looked like when they saw it because there haven't been enough men around to exemplify what they see. They get their images from their peers, from the media, and that's where they begin to strengthen themselves. But that's not really the strength that they seek. So I think when Glenn talks about malnourishment from the male perspective, the absence of male, and I'm talking physical presence, and then there's an absence of the male, and I've seen men who are present but aren't present. Men who are there who never say anything. Men who are there who feel like, well, I'll show up when there's a problem, and their response is usually something reactive rather than tutoring. rather than mentoring, rather than helping that young man or see where he needs to be. And that's typically, and Glenn in his work, those are signs of a man who also was absent a male presence to know how to do this. So this cycle that we see, and Glenn can speak to this at greater length and with more certainty, but I see a pattern, and we forget about the generational absence of men. We act as though this happened now. There are a lot of 40-year-old young boys still walking out here. And I just said, I'm going to say it. There are 40-year-old boys out here who have children who themselves weren't nurtured, but are giving some ways their young man what they had, which is not any better because they don't know what to give, or overcompensating, right? Or doing nothing at all. And Glenn, I'm sure you can comment. You've seen all of those dynamics.
You okay with me taking this, Ryan? Because you've been there patiently for some time.
Yeah, Ryan, go ahead, Ryan. Contributing because I know Glenn is chomping at the bits
I
on
have
this.
I have a piece for this.
Yeah. Okay, but Ryan, go ahead.
I'm the rookie in this. I'm going to warm the bench.
Okay, no problem. Glenn, go ahead.
So, thank you, Dr. Thompson. The absence or remoteness of father, doesn't have to be the dad, father or men in their lives, creates a hole in the young man's heart and his psyche. Now, that hole does not fill with Hollywood Bambis. It fills with demons. And those demons...
Ryan's all over that one. You can hear the clicking away the props. Go on.
It fills with demons, and those demons are distrust of older men, abandonment issues, right? And now the young man is acting out against older men, right? A distrust of other men. And now he's trying to initiate himself by going to other boys to become a man. Maybe it's a gang, right? Something silly, some kind of initiatory made-up process. This is called puarchy. It's the rule of boys. It's the story of Lord of the Flies, and it's dangerous. And this has gone on now for generations. If you want to understand what's happening to our men, that's it.
Wow. Good stuff, Glenn. Ryan, have you heard?
There is a...
you're still with us? It looks like you're going to go back in your chair there.
There is a scripture that says, "Fathers, do not lead your sons to wrath." And one of the things I believe that fathers leading their sons to wrath is exactly what you guys have been talking about. Not being there to discipline them, not being there to teach them, not being there to protect them, not being there to provide for them. And it has led their children, our sons to wrath. They are abandoned. They don't know where to go. They have no clear direction. And when you see it all the time, and let me backtrack. They act up in school, and because of them acting up, the school has led them to have labels placed upon them. And so we have they've been labeled with being retarded or having ADHD. So many types of labels, and then what happens is they get drugged, and the whole system, the whole prisoner pipeline system just begins, and it starts from the men not being there. Our men are leading our sons to wrath for a plethora of reasons.
If I can, thank you, Ryan, and you're absolutely correct. There's two pieces to that, so I would hope going forward that two things would happen. One is really that women would embrace. And I'm seeing this now, that more women embrace the role of the father or men in their lives. To leverage this all on the father, I think, is weighted too heavily alone. In times of the past, during initiatory processes, they would take the young boys from the villages at 12 or 13, and they would take them amongst many men and have many experiences. So they would be with the grandfather, and they'd be with the young warrior, and then they'd be with the cousin, the brother. So there were all of these examples and all of these teachings. And so now, with that all gone, now it's fallen on the father, right? It's all about father, the absence of father. And now that the father's gone, it befalls on the mother. And for all her good efforts, she cannot instill in the young man the male attributes because he can't mirror himself to see that example, for the cellular part of it, to see how a man deals with these things. and then multiple influences. So all that being absent, my ask of our society today is to see the value of men in this unique role. And in the absence of so many fathers and male influences in our schools, in our society, in our homes, that's why I call to have men's communities start. Mentoring men's communities. You can have them in churches, you can have them in your neighborhoods, you can have them in your schools, you can have them in your office, where the men start to begin to form these incubators, right? Where they'll take on first their own issues and then bring in other men. So when they do the mentoring, they'll break that cycle. Now, it's not a replacement for father, but a reasonable substitute for healthy men's, right? Representations of healthy men is what I'd love to see the women start to support, and to believe that that actually can happen, that there are men to be developed and who are looking to do that and support that, and to call that, celebrate that in our society. We want this. Men, we want you back. Men, we want you back in a way that is manly and strong, and in a way that you can define yourselves, because I know when a man is at his best self, he's generative. What he's around grows. The people, the circumstances grow. So that would be my hope, because I know we're wrapping around the end of this program. So that's kind of an ask of our society. Can we begin to move in that direction?
Well, yeah, I know that, Glenn, you probably have to go soon. We'll end the show off real soon. Well, we got someone else coming in, so here we go. Oh, Tony T. Yes, great gentleman. This is a great gentleman to have on the show tonight. Let's see if we can get him in. I've had a chance to. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Hello, gentlemen. How you doing?
Welcome, Tony.
Hello, Tony.
I hope you've been enjoying the conversation.
I have. I really have.
Do you have anything you'd like to contribute, or any comments for our esteemed guests? As you know, so I'm just hosting that. I'm just guiding the ship. They're driving the ship, and also you're driving the ship. Any thoughts about men's changing role in society or the conversation?
I have a couple of thoughts. And one of them is sort of piggybacking on MK. I didn't get your name, but
Glenn Barker is from Chicago.
I was hearing everything you were just saying about the mentors. I think that is a powerful thing. But I would add that it may be that we need to look at a variety of fronts in terms of dealing with this issue. And by that, I mean, one of the most powerful mechanisms for roles being defined negatively in society is the media. And I know that it has been talked about in sort of a general way, but I want to talk about it in a particular way. And by that, I mean men, taking on the responsibility of putting positive images of men in front of other men. One of the ways in which that can be done is, the question might be asked, we don't control television stations. We don't control plays and productions, and none of those things do we control. Well, we're actually on a platform where we can create our own content. And I think that if we decide that we want to create positive content, this is one of the mechanisms that can be used to do that. One of the issues that I have with the media in general is that the images of men, particularly African-American men, is extremely negative. And one might argue to say, well, the majority population has some negative images portrayed in the media. However, I would argue that there are some negative images of the majority, but they also have a balance where they have positive images to counteract the negative images. And so, whereas most African American boys do not have a positive image in the media. So this is a forum, this is a mechanism that, regardless of your economic situation, most people have a smartphone. And so if you were to create content that provided positive images, along with the mentoring programs, along with other things, we need to have discussions with women about their relationships with men. There are a lot of different fronts that need to be addressed. And I just wanted to point out that one of the most powerful for me is the media. And so we have an opportunity now to utilize platforms like Blab. So I'm going to just stop there. But
no problem, Tony. Great comments as always. I myself have been doing podcasts. Well, initially it was about Black Canadian men, then it became Black men, and now it's just men in general. I've been doing that for 9 years. But I fully agree, and it's ironic you're saying promoting the platform of Blab, because you and I fully believe in this. And earlier on in this year, myself, Glenn, and Dr. Chi, we basically met online. That Glenn was looking for a platform like this to have these type of conversations. Our podcasts were doing okay, but he said there's got to be something more that's interactive that can really get the engagement. And I think tonight Glenn is really seeing a dream for him, especially of what he's seeing, or different communities of people just chiming in, speaking truth, speaking their heart, speaking their concerns, but also speaking solutions when it comes to men and fatherhood. Like, I'm gonna shine a little light on Glenn here, but Glenn is a representative of a proposal for a White House Council on Men and Boys. So this is one of his passions, and when I can see a man's dream and vision come true with other men and other people who love men come to fruition, Blab is a great answer for it. So I fully piggyback on what you're saying, and really happy to have everyone who's on this conversation chiming in, because this is what it's all about, and it ain't stopping, because I can see just by the response tonight, we're going to be doing this hopefully weekly, but no more than every 2 weeks. We're going to be having these conversations, and I'm keeping track of what people are talking about, because I know Glenn had more that Glenn brought some stuff to the table tonight. We haven't even got near it. So, but everyone's just chimed in. So it is appreciated and not taken for granted, sir.
So I'll bring a comment to that, and I'm going to ask Dr. Thompson if he'll comment, and thank you for that, man. These are the kind of pressures that come to us.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, Tony, I'll let you sign. No problem. If anyone wants to Ryan is back in. Ryan wanted to get back in something serious. And I know we probably won't be going for too much longer. So I know, Glenn, this has probably lasted a little bit longer than you thought, but I know that you feel the positive energy. So I thank you for your time, man.
You're most welcome. I'll close it to say we've already touched on it. Yes, we've already touched on a few things, and the pressures, right, of a society, of the systems that we're in, and those that have they're opportunistic. They really don't care about the impact and consequences on our children. They want to have good programming. I don't know if they're demons or if they just they chase the demon because there's a buck there. But whatever it is, there is it's a powerful medium. Our media. It's a powerful medium. Our social networks, and who gains control of those? I'm not a really conspiracy person, but I will say they have a tremendous impact, and more than ever. Say, in the absence of remoteness of the teachers and mentors, our young people are subjected to, and then become subjects of those things that they want to emulate. And this is another danger of our time. And those that don't have rudders will be subject to the winds of whatever change blows on them hard enough. And this is a very dangerous part of our time, and more than ever, that's why I ask the men of our time and the women of our time to see the value of the male contribution and how important it is, and to start celebrating that on the scale that we can. And just in this last short year or so, I've gone with you two men, even from a boy, are we alone in this, to actually we're only at the very tip of maybe the largest iceberg of our time. And so I'm looking forward to exposing more and more of the iceberg.
It's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yep.
Anyone else want to add? I see more people are joining on, so I don't know. I may have to stay on this blog for a while, and everyone may. Hey, if you have to leave at any time, no problem.
But I'll have to be signing off, and I'll ask those that are listening to maybe can I give some contact information?
Absolutely, no problem. I'm sure there's at least our will, and I know that Upgrade to Me want to find out more where you're coming from. We've been blessed, myself and Dr. T, for a while now on getting your heart. So please share it with others.
Very good. If you'd like to get in contact with me, if you wanted to maybe start a men's community in your church, in your organization, want to know how to put something like that together, that is something you can do now. We have 700 men's groups. We have 50,000 men. We have 40 centers. We know how to do this. So if you want to build a men's community, start to provide some semblance of what a healthy men's community would look like, get a hold of me. I'm Glenn Barker. My telephone number is 312-243-6743. 312-243-6743. TheMankindProject.org can be found on the internet. Mankind Project's on Twitter. Glenn Barker is on Facebook. Thank you for having us. We'll see you next time.
Glenn, I will click you out, and we gotta go at least every 2 weeks, Glenn. You're driving craziness. You're gone crazy on us now, man.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, I'll click you out. Have a good night, Glenn. Chat with you soon. Be well.
Dr. Vibe, I just want to add one thing.
You got some time, because I don't think Dr. T's leaving anytime soon, but keep on going.
All right. So one of my favorite movies of all time is The Lion King. In The Lion King, you have Mufasa, you have his son Simba, you have Rafiki, you have Scar. Those are 4 names I'm going to put up. You have you have Simba, who was being taught by his father what to do, what not to do. His father's a protector, he's a leader, and he's showing him how to be the king that he's going to grow up to be. And so his father dies at the hands of his uncle. He leaves, and let me backtrack. Throughout this whole time, Rafiki's been there the whole time, since giving counsel to Mufasa, and he was at the birth of Simba. So Mufasa leaves, and Mufasa dies, and at the hands of Scar, and Scar takes over. It is not until and Simba, he doesn't know who he is. It's not until Simba comes in contact with Rafiki, and he basically looks in the mirror. He doesn't see himself; he sees his father, and his father tells him, "Hey, look at the stars. These are the and when you look at the stars, you're going to see all the men who have come before you." And that's what we need to do now. We need to have people. We need to be able to look in the mirror and not see ourselves, but see our Father in front of us. And we need to see, when we look up in the skies and say, "Hey, I have all these men," or around us, I say, "I have all these men around me, teaching me and showing me what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to be a man?" And Rafiki is, I guess, like that uncle in our lives who is always there teaching us what to do. And it is not until Simba confronts Scar, he becomes the king that he's truly meant to be. And that's just a reference point as far as showing us how a man showed his son who he should really be, who the king he really meant to be. So I just wanted to add that.
No problem. That's what Blab's all. You're just adding. We've got someone who wants to come in, Fathers Forever. Just waiting for him. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
How are you?
I'm well. How are y'all?
Doing great, my friend.
I am blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem.
I love that. I have to steal that. Can I take it?
Hey, you know what? I like sharing. Sharing is caring.
First time I'll give you credit. The next time is mine.
I received that. I hope you're enjoying the conversation.
Yes, sir. I am. The man was talking about the Lion King. That's one of my favorite movies. Really, it came a time in my life where I was going through divorce, and now becoming a father of my 3 kids. Single father of my 3 kids, and it was a hard time for me. Struggling, my kids was 7, 9, and 11, and here I am, a single father with not very experienced in knowing how to cook and all that. So I got 3 kids I got to feed now, and of course, a 15-year marriage, it wasn't bad. So I'm struggling with those issues, and the Lion King came at a time where it really gave me hope. It really gave me a lot of strength. In fact, we got a dog, and we named the dog Simba. But and I had it on my banner in my bedroom, a Tuna Bakata. So those I really that movie really got me through a lot of things that I personally need to get through. And out of that, I raised my kids, and they all grown now. And I started an organization called Fathers Forever, and it's really about helping fathers be better fathers. These guys they're court ordered to come to our program from the court system. They're not paying their child support for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons why men don't pay child support. It's not all because they're deadbeat dads. I know there's some deadbeat dads out there. I absolutely do know that. But there are some guys out there who's struggling, and not because they don't love their kids. They made some bad decisions. They got some mistakes. They got criminal records. They can't find a job. There's a host of things that keep them from paying child support. Well, instead of the judge putting them in jail, they send them to our program. And for 24 weeks, we teach them a crash course in fatherhood. And over the last
that's fantastic.
Over the last 4 years,
that's good stuff.
380 guys have graduated through our program, and now 80% of them got jobs and really are taking responsibility, paying the child support, and doing things that they need to do to take care of their kids. So I love the organization. 90% of the guys I ordered to our program are African American men. I'm not sure exactly why that. I know there's some white men not paying their child support either, but when you look at the whole thing, the court system, I'm not really going to get into all that. But there's a lot of African American men that's at risk of going to jail for non-child support. And these guys, we have some good conversations. We talk about some of the issues that facing us as men, and especially as African American men. And so I really love the conversation, and I really, sit back and watch you guys, because I believe if we're going to fix our society, we got to change the narrative of fatherhood. We got to make fatherhood is not a luxury; it's indispensable. It's necessary. It's got to have. It's not something that we can do without. We have to have fathers involved in their kids' lives, and we got to make fatherhood cool. We got to make it a thing that you just can't do without it. We got to have fathers. If the father is not there, whether he dead, whether he in prison, other men got to step up to the plate and be the surrogate fathers to these young boys who are really, really out there with no father figure and no direction. And we can't leave it up to the mom to do it. The moms are doing a good job. They're doing the best that they can, but they can't raise a man as a man, and it takes fathers. And unfortunately, they're having to do a lot of that on their own because we're not stepping up to the plate. And so we got to really make this a national effort to really get fathers back involved in their kids' lives.
Powerful.
That's a good point. Excellent point.
First things first, I want to bow my head to you for stepping up to be a father and a man and a provider for your children. Every person, I fully believe this, and a mentor of mine told me this, every person has a 6-figure story. That's your 6-figure story, brother.
Thank you.
There you go.
That's your 6-figure story. I want you, if you can, to wherever you go and you find that opportunity, you share that with everyone you meet, male, female, doesn't matter what age.
Wow.
Because we need to see more of that. They need to hear more of that. And that's, again, why this platform, that's why I've been doing what I've been doing for many years. And it's interesting, one of the most listened to podcasts I've had during my journey was a gentleman who wife and him divorced, and how he had to fight the court system to get custody of his daughter. That's a whole side of that isn't a lot in the media that definitely we don't hear enough about. So, you know, I think that you'd have to get that story out. Have to, if I can help you in any way, because we have to get these stories of manhood out there. Doesn't matter how big or small it is. In fact, it's the stories like yours that really make it count. Because one of the things that I've experienced in doing my show for 9 years, had a lot of men on the show, backgrounds, creeds, colors, places in the world. Most men have the same challenges, believe it or not.
Right. Yes. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And you sharing your story, you have no idea how many men out there need that nudge, you know, who are questioning, should I do it? And just like young boys are looking for examples, we have men out here looking for examples that you're providing, right? And knowing it's comfortable to go to that place. So I encourage, I'm with Dr. Vibe. You need to share that as often as you like. There's a lot of men walking around internalizing a lot of this. And, you know, you sharing that just creates an opportunity for them to go act on it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I really it's challenging. It really is challenging. But you know, I couldn't have wrote this script. I couldn't have made this up. It was like, you know, it was ordained by God. You know, I grew up in a household with my dad. I had a good relationship with my dad. We was all by his bedside when he passed away. And then I was my full-time job. I retired. I was a counselor. And I work with people with mental illness, you know, paranoid schizophrenic, bipolar, substance abuse. And a lot of them, they're adults now, and they come to our office. And one of the things I realized, there was a common denominator when we're doing the biosocial on them and getting their history. And we asked a question about their life. And a lot of times the box that was unchecked, when I asked them, did they know your father? And a lot of times the answer was no. And now these guys are having a hard time. They're adults now, but they're having a really hard time in life. You know, substance abuse, depression. And so I grew my dad, and then for the last 20 years, I worked in a system, and I've seen the devastation of kids growing up without their dad, now adults. And then I became a single father myself, not knowing that was going to happen. And then I had this idea of starting a fatherhood program. And it's really, really been successful. We really have touched a lot of men. I want to make it a national model, or at least a statewide model, that, you know, the court system instead of putting guys in jail. And I understand you got to do that. If the guys are not paying their child support, they're not doing the thing they should do. I understand the consequences of that. However, there should be another side of the coin, that while they're in there, you should be able to teach them, you know, fatherhood, give them some tools. Give them some understanding of what it is. And most of all, show them the importance that they sometimes don't know. Because a lot of these men grow up without their father. They have no clue what it is to be a man, to be a father. And now they got these kids.
Exactly.
And it's easy to walk away and let somebody else do it, because I'm not making excuses for them, because we deal with this on a regular basis, but I could understand some of the frustration that they have and not being able to do that. So we gotta pull them. We got to pull them back to the altar, if you will, and help them see the error of their ways. Help them see their responsibility as a man, that their kids are dependent on them, and they can't rely on nobody else to take care of their kids. And so, you know, that's why it's really important that we have to, you know, to make this a statewide effort to really get fathers on board and be responsible. And, you know, because like you said, men have a lot of challenges. We're the head, we're the leaders, and sometimes we take the brunt of things. And if you're not prepared for it, you know, our family is going to suffer. You know, so those are the things that I'm really excited about it. So I'll be quiet, because I can talk about this to Jesus.
No.
Well, you know what, and it's wonderful that you came on, because the title of the episode or our show tonight, my show tonight, was men's changing role in society, and you've had to change roles in society.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a great example of adapting and overcoming. I love overcomers. Absolutely love overcomers. That's, okay. So at Upgrade to Me has a question for you though. So get ready. She's on point. She goes, let me get this straight. So if you don't pay child support, then you satisfy your debt by working for the government in jail, prison. How is that helping the parent that needs the support? Our world is so twisted.
I have an answer to that. Putting the man in jail is not the answer necessarily. Now there's 2 points to that. The one side of that is some men, they give them a warning of paying the child support, and the only thing they can really respond to and when they take their freedom away, because some men just, they're not responding to anything until that. On the other hand, putting a man in jail, they're absolutely right. He cannot work, and he therefore cannot pay his child support. So there's got to be 2 folds to that. You got to be able to say there is a consequence for your behavior. You cannot go around and not raise your kids. You cannot do that. You got to pay child support. You got to pay this money, and the consequence to that is you're going to go to jail if you don't do it. That's the reality of it. That piece needs to be there, because we can't have these guys walk around and having these kids and no responsibility. On the other hand, we have to train them, because now jail is not rehabilitation. It's just 2 hours in a cot while they're in jail or before they go to jail. We need to teach them skills that can help them get jobs, skills about fatherhood, that when they do get out, they could be responsible. So you got to have 2 folds. You got to be able to hold them accountable for what they're not doing. At the same time, teach them how to do the things they need to do. And that's what we're trying to do. The court system becomes our friend now, because these guys are not going to come to us on their own. They're going to come to us when the court says you got to go. You got a jail sentence, you got fathers forever. Any person in his right mind would take fathers forever. But, so you got to have those kind of choices there. You got to have that car over his head to make him do. And then, because 95% of the guys that went to our program, over 380 of them, only 5 came on their own. The rest of them was made to come. Wow. Because a lot of times, men, we're not going to do things until we're made to do it. Sometimes, we don't go to the doctor until stuff fall off. When things don't work, we go to the doctor. But in the meantime, we just push it under the rug. That's just kind of our nature. So these guys don't really come until the court system say you got to go. And when the court system says you got to go,
so let me ask,
they'll go.
Let me ask you, when the court orders them, do you see, does their situation change? Does it improve for them? Does it keep them out of jail so that they can continue to work, but at the same time grow and develop into their responsibilities?
Yes. Absolutely. I could see it. I mean, I could tell you stories upon stories upon stories upon stories, how these guys come to us and they really pissed off. They are mad with me. They're mad with the court system. They're mad with the ex-wife. They're mad with the mama, the dog, the cat. They're mad with everybody. And they blame everybody for where they are. And I want to say, you didn't get there. You got there because of the choice and the decision that you made. And one of the classes that we teach them is the difference between a mistake and a bad choice. If I step on your toe, that's a mistake. I miscalculated where your foot was at. That's a mistake. If I go out and get a DUI, if I go out and get a girl pregnant, that's not a mistake. That's a bad choice. As long as we keep calling bad choices mistakes, we'll never correct our bad choices, because after all, everybody make mistakes. But when I say that's a bad choice, now I take ownership of my bad choices and I correct my bad choices because I don't like the circumstances. But as long as I keep calling it a mistake, I'm going to keep doing it. And these are the things we kind of teach. And at some point in time, in the 24 weeks, the light bulb come on, they see it, they understand it, and they realize. And so 80% of the guys graduate with jobs, not because we go out and get them jobs, but because somewhere down the line, something clicks and they realize this is about me. This is about my kid. I'm not being a good father. And they go out and they find jobs. And you see the whole attitude change. You see them coming.
I'm gonna cap it right there. Because I know you could go on for a bit, but I'm just gonna interrupt for a little bit. One thing I will add there, and one of the things I always share with people is, a mistake is a moment. It's not a person.
Exactly. Right.
So I'm just gonna see. There's some hot conversation going on in the comments here. It's the purse says, if a woman doesn't provide basic needs for her children, the children's services get involved, and she could be put in jail or punished. So why can't a man be put in jail for neglect?
And they do.
Can I answer this?
Okay, I'll let Dr. T first on that one.
Yeah, I want to. This is one of the issues when we start looking at talking about external entities getting involved in family life. And there's one clear principle that if you get your head around this, it's all going to make sense. You render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. Meaning, if you don't take care of what's in your house, don't be surprised if somebody else isn't. That it's just that simple. When you don't take care of your business, somebody else will, because you not taking care of your business is going to negatively impact someone else. Social services, prison systems, they don't get to exist if there's not a reason to exist. They begin to define how they're going to be involved because our society and the way we respond to certain things or don't respond create opportunities for them. So when we talk about government growing and how they get involved, I'm not a proponent of child protective services unless it's extreme conditions, taking away a child from a family. I'm just not. I don't like the way our court system looks at custody issues and divorce from a monetary approach. Right. And when we look at juvenile justice, we moved away from rehabbing kids in the 70s. It was all about warehousing. And the bottom line, when you start not doing something, you're going to pay Caesar. And Caesar is government. Caesar is the system. And if we begin to understand that, all questions around what's happening begin to move closer and closer to your front door and into your house, because that's where it really matters, and into your community. That's where it really matters, and this is where the role of men come into play. So all of this still comes back to the family. I don't care how you talk about it. You can talk about it from the presidential level to every department and agency. It doesn't matter. It all comes down to what starts in your house. And when you don't render right in your house, you will always pay Caesar, because your neighbor is going to demand that somebody do something about it.
I agree totally. Yes.
Excellent. We do have an open seat. I'm going to go for about another 7-8 minutes if anyone else wants to join into the conversation. Like I said, I originally scheduled an hour for tonight, but it's been so streaming and cooking. I'm going to go to for 2 hours. I thank everyone again for all the comments that have been coming out on this, and a lot of great commentary. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
Where I guess, as we wind down tonight, men's changing role in society. Anyone have some final thoughts before we shut it down tonight? Where do you want it to go? So I'll start with Fathers Forever first.
I think that the leadership, the powers that be, have to change their mindset about help women get help, kids need to get help, but somehow the father get left out of the equation. So we got to be.
Why do you feel fathers are being left out of the
because there's not a lot of service for men. There's not a lot of program. When you look at locally, when you look at money wise, fatherhood programs are the first one that's cut. There's not a whole lot of fatherhood programs out there to show men, to teach men how to be fathers. So I'm saying that the powers that be have got to understand that men need help as well, and they got to shift some of that too, because a lot of times the women and the kids are struggling because the men is not there doing their part. So to leave him out and just focus on the woman and the child, you're not fixing the problem. So you got to give him some services. You got to give him some skills to go out and get a job. You got to make him employable. You got to invest in him. Because if you don't, you just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. Because he's just going to go out and get another woman pregnant and go down the street and the process keep going on and on and on and on. We've got to stop it, and the way to stop it is, in my opinion, is to start investing in men and get some viable program that will help them understand their role as fathers.
Dr. T.
I couldn't agree more with our friend in North Carolina. And by the way, where in North Carolina are you? Yeah, Raleigh. My brother's in Charlotte. I go there quite a bit.
Okay, yeah, I would love to meet you sometime, man.
Well, hopefully, based on this conversation, at least we can start following each other on Twitter.
Yeah.
And as I said, we'll be having these programs at least every 2 weeks, if not every week, because there seems to be a strong demand for them. And that's what myself, Dr. T, and I really wish Glenn was still on this blog, because I know that Fathers Forever and Mankind Project in Chicago, there is so much unity there and synergy. Yeah, Dr. T knows that Glenn would be loving this conversation, but Glenn's gone away, but he will be back with, if not next week, the week after. So Dr. T, some closing comments.
We got two Glens. My name is Glenn too.
There you go.
Glenn B.
Yeah.
I just love the conversation, just the mere fact that we had so much participation and the passion that all the participants brought to the table. And there's just as many women as there are men. And I think that's important to note. It's not just men are looking for this answer. There are women who want men to find it. So I think there's a couple other dynamics that are at play here. The one thing that I would encourage to happen is, and I think Glenn, our friend in North Carolina, just pointed out, there are not enough of these opportunities for men to speak in. And at the same time, I think we need opportunities for women to allow men to share these, their observations and their perceptions about what's happening. It doesn't mean it's fact. I think there's enough to say that a lot of men don't feel heard even when they speak.
Right.
And I think that's a huge piece of, men have often been required to hold their feelings in and be stoic. Yes. But we're now understanding, and 20 years ago, they've encouraged us to speak out and share. And I think men have been trying to do that amidst all the changes. As women progress, they've been focused on, of course, addressing some of the changes, whether it's been positive or in some cases negative. However, men struggle quietly and have been, and I think aside from us knowing and having the opportunity to speak to ourselves, we also need to find women and women who are listening need to have an ear for men. Just like men do. Sometimes you don't have to have the answer. You just need to listen.
Yeah. And one of the stories that I wrote a book called Chat and Chew. And one of the stories I put in, I talked about the quiet storm. And I talk about that very thing, that these men, we're taught of all of our lives to deny our feelings. And I relate that to a quiet storm. And my book is called Chat and Chew. It's inspirational short stories, not just about fatherhood, but it's about life in general. And I talk about the quiet storm that we have sometimes, that 80% of the people who commit suicide are men. It's because sometimes we don't share our feelings. We deny that we're even in pain until one day we can't take it no more and we check out, And sometimes, suicide is one of the things, but we check out in so many other ways. We leave our family and still do that. We still, have a relationship with our wife, but we already left the relationship because we've been taught to hide our pain. We still at our job, but we left a long time ago. And nobody never know it because it's learned behavior. And so we have to dig into some of those core things that's learned behavior and kind of help men find out who they really are and have somebody to talk to. Because we got tear ducts too. We cry,
Yeah, well, you know what? I will just add some things too. For too many men, the easiest thing is to quit.
Yes, exactly.
And,
right.
And that's something we need to deprogram, that quitting is easy.
Yes, quitting easy.
Yes. It's for the things that are right, you don't quit.
You can't, it's not an option.
You know?
Yes.
And as I say to share with many people, I've never seen a statue raised for a quitter.
Exactly. Right. I might die trying, but let me try. Let me die trying. You can't quit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep on saying to men out there, I say, you know what? And there's a lot of men out there that are screaming and nothing's coming out.
Yes.
And those are the men that we really need. And it's actually in front of me. One of the first shows I did, a man said something that I'll never forget, that you say, you know, whenever you see a man, say hello to him, because sometimes just saying hello will give that man the strength to live another day.
Yes. I need your help, because one day I want to start a blab one day. I want to, so I need you guys to
come on. Hey, I'm following you on Twitter, and you're following me. So that's one of the things I do with men. And one of the reasons I'm do as much as I can on social media is to show them how they can use this thing, especially for a positive thing, because the ladies have got this down.
Yes.
And we got to catch up.
Yes.
So we got to catch up, brother. Right. So I'm not a genius, but I share as much as I can. See, as I told Dr. T and Glenn when we first started, I'm going to drag you through this. If it takes the last breath of strength I get, I'm going to make sure. So
I got the space to prove it.
Yeah. So for them to be on a blab, it's like I've just hit Mount Vesuvius right now. So if I can do it with them, I know I can do it with you, Fathers Forever. Yes. That is no problem.
Yes. I need you guys.
So as we shut down, and there's conversation going on like crazy in the comments room, and more people are joining on, which means we got to do this. But I'm going to read something. Actually, Upgrade to me has something I'm just reading. Just see. I'm going to close it off with this. Actually, you know what? Fathers Forever. How can people get in touch with you?
www.afatherforever. I'll write it in.
Yeah, write it in the.
Yeah, I'll write it in the sidebar here.
Okay, and Dr. T, if you can do the same, even just put your Twitter handle on the side.
I certainly will.
And what I'm going to do is, while you gentlemen are doing that, I'm going to read the closing words. And I'd like to thank everyone who was on this conversation tonight. Like, I try to name all of you, but if I leave someone out, I'm in trouble. So hold on, I'm going to try as I scroll across. At @ourwill_1. At Beto_Hess. At EBEB Brown 3. At Ever Forward Club. At The Blog. At Fathers Forever. At Akesia Jones. Yes. At Tiffany Rochelle 1. Of course, at Upgrade to Me. At A Streaming Voice. At MKP Chicago. And at Dr. T Educates. I'll close off with something that Upgrade to Me has put. Dear men, our independence does not mean we emasculate your manhood. Our independence means that we are not lazy, trifling women waiting to be rescued. We are women doing what needs to be done, and we are handling our business. Don't let our independence fool you. Please know that we want you, and more importantly, we need you. You're for more than just sex or moving furniture objects. Sincerely, ladies with great minds. So on that, I'm going to close down the blab. If you want to touch base with me, it's at drvibeshow.com. You can also catch me. I'll just put my Twitter handle here. And also I'll put where my show can be found, where I have over 1,000 conversations with men and those who love them all over the world. And also I'm a certified empowerment coach, specializing helping men empower their lives so they can live better and more meaningful lives. As I like to say, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and your solution for someone's problem. We will be back very soon because you want us back. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.